All right, Ted, I'm going to need a skill check. Roll D20.
All right, so that's -2 for stat, not proficient. All right, I crit. Do I know the demon's name?
No, Ted, I'm sorry. It's a skill check, and that's only an 18. That's not going to do it.
This game sucks.
All right, Ted, you good now? You got that out of your system?
Yeah, I'm all right.
In case you didn't know, my name is Nerdarchist Dave from Nerdarchy, for nerds, by nerds, and today I'm hanging out with this nerd.
Nerdarchist Ted.
Deck of Many stuff is in front of us, therefore that must mean something. It's a sponsored video. We want to thank our sponsors because without them this would not be possible. You can check out the description where you can find a link to Deck of Many as well as their Kickstarter that's currently going on for these sweet, sweet holographic spell cards. Go check out the Kickstarter. Support the sponsors as a way of supporting us.
All right, so today we're going to talk about how crits ruin the game.
Yeah, absolutely. Crit successes, crit fails. When we were talking about doing this video, we spent a lot of time talking about crit fails, and the interesting thing is a lot of people incorporate them into their game, but it's not actually a part of the game and never really has been. Now, it might be for certain games, just not for Dungeons and Dragons.
Having played many iterations of the game, you playing basically all of them, we kind of went through some of the old rule books and we couldn't find anything specifically saying that on a 1 bad stuff happens. It typically is a failure for attack rolls, saving throws, that kind of stuff. But even skill checks, a 1 doesn't automatically mean you fail. In 5th edition anyway, you still just add your bonuses, and if you can hit that DC, you still pass.
You do it, yeah. With that, we're going to kind of delve into this topic, this conversation. You know, how do you feel about crits, whether good, bad, indifferent? And also, I guess we can mention that in the 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons group, there was a conversation going on about a crit fail, and that's kind of what sparked our inspiration to do this video.
And some of the things that have been brought up is that some DMs out there, they do horrific rules when you roll that natural 1. And I'm not talking about, oh, well, you know, you fall or you throw your weapon. And I've seen this used many times, but like one of the things that was called a question is you attack your ally when you roll that 1. And that could be pretty disastrous, especially when you scale that to higher level. And you have a fighter who is so proficient in their weapon that they get that many more chances of attacks, which increases your chances of those natural 1s.
Yeah, that's a good point. Like any character class that as they get better, that kind of translates into them getting more attack rolls. That means they have that many more chances to crit fail or crit succeed. But still, like, yes, you would expect someone who is more proficient, more skilled to get better at doing the thing that they do, but not necessarily get worse at doing the thing they do, because that's how it works out. Like, Anthony from Cardboard Fortress hates the idea of crit fails and crit fumbles because of that reason. The fighter especially, he might be rolling 5 to 9 attacks in a round, so his chances of rolling a 1 have considerably gone up over maybe the rogue that's going to roll 1 die, because it's still, either way, it's like a 5% chance, crit fumble or crit success.
The Warlock, which in 5th edition is very much known for using Eldritch Blast as a staple, by the time you get to those higher levels, you're rolling 4 of them when you cast that spell, which if you're using that, oh, you won, that means you're hitting your ally with that spell instead of an enemy. That kind of stinks when it's supposed to be a scaled, I am incredibly powerful, I am incredibly proficient, why am I having an increased chance in hitting out?
Yeah, I mean, if we look back at our own games, right, one of the stories we've told over and over again is just that. It happened because of a crit fail, right? One of the characters, they rolled a 1, and we always said, well, you roll a 1, you throw your weapon. And we'd also a lot of times, you know, do the grenade thing to see which way it goes. And, you know, it just so happened that it went in the direction of another player. So as the GM, I made him roll another attack roll. Well, what does he follow that crit fail up with? Crit success, you know, against the ally, winging his greatsword at him, slamming into him, you know, downing the player. He was carrying a lantern, So the lantern breaks. He catches fire. One of the other players rolls him into the river. So now he's drowning.
He's unconscious, bleeding to death, on fire, and then now drowning.
Yes. So that's a good. It was funny at the time, although the one player did not appreciate it at all.
It's a great story. Now, there might be some animosity between this player and Dave. I don't really know. But we look back to this memory and we laugh. But I don't think in today's game, because this was years and years ago. This was
decades.
Still playing second edition. Like, I don't think that play style matches up and meshes with the heroic play style of what 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons is supposed to be.
I guess it depends on the group, right? Because I know even in playing 5e, I know there's a lot of players and GMs out there that do like to do that. They like the wonkiness of crit successes and crit fails, and they love fumble decks and crit decks and charts.
All right, so here's my take. I ran a game, just this past Tuesday, and the characters are low level. They're still in that first tier of play. And I decided, since this was, a handful of new players, I wanted to actually use some of these, crit fumbles because they're low level. But it gave me the thought process, especially while we were preparing for this video, that it's like you could literally still incorporate them into that low level because they're inexperienced. They're beginning players, and you can slowly phase those type of things out throughout the different tiers of play, and maybe, by the time they're 10th level, okay, a 1 is just a miss, but nothing bad happens. But you could then be rewarding and say, okay, well, maybe the crit successes wind up giving more as a balancing because they become more proficient, as an adventurer.
When we played D&D in a castle, we played D&D, GM Tim, what he did was, if you rolled a nat 1, you then rolled again, and if you rolled and you rolled a miss, something mild would happen. But then if you rolled a 1 again, then something really horrific was going to happen. Which, I guess that's a little bit better because that is, 5% of 5%. But that being said, like, if you decide to do that, you have to be prepared for the consequences because it's going to come up. In our Saber Dice game 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, whatever it was, the halfling character used his ability to make me re-roll after I crit him. And he's like, aha, I got you. And everyone at the table was like, yeah, right? Everyone's cheering because he was going to avoid the nat 20. But I nat 20'd again. And, it's using software that, is showing the rolls. So it's like, that's what happened. And, so it can still happen.
You got to love that kind of stuff. I know in our games, we keep trying to play around with what house rules we're going to use at our table. And there's been times where, like, if you roll with disadvantage and you roll double 1s, something bad happens. But along the same lines, where we've done, if you roll with advantage and you roll double 20s, we've done increase the multiplier, which is like an old 3rd edition, kind of mindset. And
no, it wasn't. That was another house rule.
Oh, okay.
Because what we used to do was, okay, so in 3rd edition, if you played it, then you already know. But if you didn't, this is how it worked. If you crit, and it didn't have to be a 20, it just depended on what weapon you had, what feats you had, what class, prestige class, race, day of the week, whatever. All these different things would come in, the stars align, boom, critical, right? So you've crit, well, you haven't yet crit. Then you had to confirm the crit and roll again. And so what we had done was, if you crit it and then you confirm the crit with a nat 20, then it increased the multiplier. But we did it where if you kept rolling nat 20s, it kept increasing the modifier. Now, it was very rare that it ever increased more than once, but it could happen, and it's wonky and fun when it does.
We've seen all kinds of craziness, but that was apparently, it was one of our house rules that we had a lot of fun with, and I liked that mindset. So like you can play with your crit fumbles and your crit success, and have fun. One of the house rules that we're still working on was my game is like 18th, 19th level, and we use that if you crit, rather than just doubling dice, you max your first pool, and then you roll your damage normally and add everything together. So you're getting max on all your dice highly crazy when you get those high-level rogues and paladins. You add your modifier, and then you add the actual pool of dice. So in my game Saturday night, I put out this encounter. I've got, an epic level Archmage hag that's, got some allies and stuff going on. And Ryan's character, playing a rogue, he's got some awesome stuff. And he fires with his crossbow, totally crits. It's a sneak attack. Does 120 plus points of damage to my Archmage hag. Takes it completely out in one shot. It's like, that one's gone. Glad I had a couple to spare.
Yeah, so it really illustrated one of the points from that session, that while it seems like it's a cool rule, and it is, right? But it's going to reward certain characters way more than others. Your paladins and your rogues get a lot of dice. So by doubling, by maxing out that first dice pool and then letting them roll, they're going to do significantly more than anybody else. So then we have to kind of like think about that and go, yes, it's fun, but does it kind of steal the thunder from the other players at the table? Maybe we should do something different. For instance, now we're adjusting, right? We might do max weapon damage, and the pools still get rolled normally, just for fairness to the fighters and rangers and the other classes that don't have those huge dice pools to roll.
I don't know. What if I crit on my disintegration ray?
Well, yeah, there's that too.
That's 100 plus 10 die 6.
Yeah, but I think there's a saving throw in there, so that's not a big deal. I don't think you actually roll. Do we even play this game? Really, folks? So that's a variant rule that we introduced in our own game, that now we're like, okay, we have to re-examine it. And that's why there's playtests, right? To see if things work, if they don't work. And one of the things that I definitely did in my own games is I only do the max dice for the players, not the monsters. Because you have to remember, anytime you introduce a rule like this, when it has to do with rolling dice, it's going to dramatically affect your players far more than it's going to affect the DM or the monsters. And frankly, who cares if it affects the DM or the monster? Like, I'm not the star of the game, of the sessions. The characters should be, right? They're the main characters. So I really wouldn't want me to like one-shot one of them just because I got lucky with a 20, and then we implemented this weird rule, that is going to be detrimental to players. That wouldn't be fun to me.
Again, we go back to that old school style of running where, okay, there's maybe a little bit of antagonism between player and GM, and it's a little bit of a competition. I'm looking to create something that's incredibly challenging and what have you, and to that extent, there is some of that in 5th edition. You want that challenging story, but in the end, we're telling a story together. We as GMs, we really should want our players to succeed. We want the story to keep going. And if you start offing your player characters because you're rolling well, that's not an exciting story to tell. That's you TPKing because your dice are hot tonight. So I don't do that as a GM either. I look to say, okay, well, all right, well, if I'm rolling, 46, well, I'll just roll 8 die 6, and it's a little mini fireball, and I calculate it all together. I don't need to max that out and then add the extra dice.
I totally agree. So there are several other games as well that have different kinds of critical systems other than Dungeons and Dragons. You have Cypher System, where they have a gradient kind of crit system where 18, 19, 20, they all do something special. Obviously, it scales up. The higher that you go on that scale, the cooler the effect or thing that you can do.
Yeah, you got like a minor benefit, a minor effect, extra damage, or like that 20 is bam, you get something really good, which I think is a really cool system.
Then there's systems like Rollmaster, which had tables and charts for everything, especially if you crit it. Things could get really nasty. And that's a good example, in my opinion, where it's really bad. Because, again, it's not a big deal when it happens to the monsters. But when it happens to your players, you start eating through them. And to me, that's not what the game's about. A little bit like what you were talking about. Secretly, I want to cheer for my players, even when I'm talking smack on them. I want them to succeed and win, even if outwardly facing, it appears that I'm against them. Because, I want to tell a story with them. I want them to succeed in the end. But I want it to be challenging and exciting. And it's just fun to smack talk.
you know, you're using these charts and you cut off a monster's, you know, legs, arms, or that tail, which has got a nasty attack, you know, that's an awesome moment. All right, you didn't kill the monster, but you've disabled one of its attacks. Oh, that's fantastic. But you chop off your player's leg at a low level, you've essentially, he's not dead, but you've put that character out of the game because they are not within reach of a spell that's going to regrow that leg. It's just like, dude.
Yeah, or they forever had this complication that they have to deal with, and you know, some players are into that. It might be make for interesting role play and you know, overcoming of obstacles. But for the most part, you know, I think most of our players like to play heroes.
Right.
So there's also Open Legend and Warhammer 40K where the dice explode. So anytime you roll max on a die, you keep rolling it and keep adding to the result, and it gets better. That's another form of critical success. Also, then in Warhammer 40K, you have a glory die, right? So on that special die, if you roll a 1, then something bad happens. So that has its own like built-in. That one actually does kind of have a crit fail built into it.
So I love exploding dice. I got exposed to this specifically with Open Legend, and I've been trying to figure out how I might be able to incorporate that into D&D. I haven't quite figured out a way yet, but I'm trying.
Maybe you will, maybe you will. But you know what? Other folks might have an idea how to incorporate that into their game, or you know, any other critical success or fumble rules that you're using. We'd love to hear about them, and that is down in the comments below. While you're at it, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.
After you've done that, make sure you head to the description so you can check out the links to the Kickstarter and Deck of Many.
So until next time,
Stay nerdy.